Good morning, everybody. This morning, Democratic leaders Blue, Jackson, and I sent Senator Berger and Speaker Moore a compromise proposal on the budget. Now, too often in today's politics and government, compromise is frowned upon by many. But we know that for this budget to move forward, we must be willing to have honest give and take. And it requires an honest discussion where everything that both sides consider important is on the negotiating table. Now that we've actually seen the Republican legislature's budget, we can offer a detailed compromise that can help bring both sides together. There are many places of common ground, along with many things that I don't like in their budget. And I'm willing to give on things that I don't like in order to move our state forward. Our compromise budget gives North Carolina an opportunity to secure health insurance for over 500,000 people and strengthen public education while still balancing the budget, cutting taxes for people, and saving responsibly. Now, we have the details with exact numbers to share with you all today, but here are some key points. My original budget that I proposed to the General Assembly had an average teacher pay raise of 9.1% over the 2 years. The legislature's budget that passed had just a 3.8% with a one-time bonus. We propose to eliminate the Republicans' corporate tax cut and instead put that money toward an average 8.5 teacher pay raise with a plan that gives every teacher a raise. It also provides for non-certified school personnel along with university and community colleges to get significantly higher raises than were in the Republican budget. Remember that 5% for state employees only applied to 27% of our state employees and left out non-school certified school personnel, community colleges, and universities. But we've expanded pay raises in all three of those areas. We are willing to compromise and maintain private school vouchers for those who use them now, but propose we do not include any additional money for future private school vouchers. We will accept the change in the income tax standard deduction that was in the Republican budget that will result in lower taxes for a number of families. Now, I've made it clear that I don't like the Republican budget State Capital Improvement Fund, the so-called SCIF, that they have used to fund capital projects because it squirrels away money that is needed now and promises projects years down the road that may never be built. A voter-approved bond guarantees more badly needed school construction, and it's a more reliable option that lets us take advantage of historically low interest rates. So we propose, leaders Jackson and Blue and I, we propose that we meet in the middle with a smaller, more responsible SCIF and a smaller bond. Now that would allow all of the local projects in the Republican conference budget to be funded while promising public school districts a reliable source of bond funding that is higher in every single county and can be used to renovate and rebuild our schools. A smaller SCIF would free up money to strengthen our investments in our workforce training, clean air and water, and more educator support like master's pay. These and other things are in our compromise offer. And yes, our compromise proposal includes an expansion of Medicaid, so that we can help more than 500,000 North Carolinians afford health insurance, creating jobs, saving rural hospitals, and battling the opioid crisis. The plan that we sent to legislators this morning is a balanced budget with tax cuts for people that invests in our people and communities today while saving for tomorrow. It's responsible. It offers give and take. Republican leaders should consider it closely as we continue to negotiate. And I'd be glad to take your questions. Yes.
So I just ran over here where the House Health Committee is hearing the House Bill 655, the Medicaid expansion bill. So say they pass it tonight, does that change your stance at all?
I think that's a good step forward. Clearly, if they're discussing it, they realize that it's an important part of this process. But it has to go through two chambers in order to pass. And I'll leave it at that. Yes?
Oh, that bill also includes a work requirement for Medicaid expansion. Does your Medicaid expansion proposal in your compromise budget include a work expansion?
It does not. It does not include that, nor does it include premiums. We do know that those issues need to be discussed.
Did you make any changes to your Medicaid plan that you're pushing in this compromise?
No, we did not.
And would you support premiums and work requirements if that got you Medicaid expansion?
So-
Would you support Carolina Care?
So we will, I would rather have a pure Medicaid expansion, and here's why. It costs more to enforce premiums and work requirements than it's worth. We've seen that in other states. And in addition, most of the people we're talking about here, the vast majority of people already are working. But those are items that can be discussed as we continue to negotiate this budget.
And then just more broadly, I mean, it seems like your compromise position here is you get pretty much everything you want. And there's a little bit of movement on the SCIF, very little movement on vouchers.
No, we propose to eliminate vouchers. But what we've done is left the money in the base budget for the people who are using them now to continue to use them with no future money for vouchers, which I think is a fair compromise. Secondly, we've reduced our bond. Thirdly, we've compromised on teacher pay. And what we've done is we've ended up spending the same amount of money in the first year that the Republicans spent and $150 million less in the second year than Republicans spent.
There would be no franchise tax cut, right?
That's correct. That's correct. There is significant movement because we're accepting the SCIF. And we have been saying that we don't want to have the SCIF. We're also agreeing to all of the local projects that are in this budget. And if it were up to me, there would be a number of them that would need more scrutiny before they would become law, but we're ready to accept all of them. Yes, sir.
Briefly, Governor, though, is there wiggle room on the so-called Carolina plan in your mind or not?
All of these issues are open to negotiation. Yes, they are. The problem is that we have not had a negotiation. I think we're in a position now that, we have been saying a lot of these things to the legislature in general because we had no idea what their budget was going to be. Now we know, and now we're able to offer specific compromise to this. We've accepted most of the Republican budget. So this is a serious compromise proposal that Republican leaders ought to consider. And we'd love to sit down and talk about it and entertain a counteroffer that they might want to make. Yes.
You just touched on it, but from this standpoint, it does seem like you're talking, they're talking, at each other and simultaneously, but not to and with each other. And I'm just wondering, has there been any shuttle diplomacy, anything going
Well, the
on
first-
behind the scenes? And if not, when do you think?
So what's been happening is I don't think Republican leaders want to negotiate with Democratic leaders and me right now, because they're spending most of their time trying to get Democratic votes to override my veto. So this is why we've not had serious discussions. We have put now a very specific proposal on the table. This opens up the matter to serious negotiations and give and take. And we've made a big concession in, maybe about 98% of their budget is accepted, but what we want to do is to make sure we have the right kind of education and healthcare, workforce, air and water investments that we need. And when you take out the corporate tax, when you reduce the SCIF, when you take money that was going to additional private school vouchers, you have enough money to make those investments. So we now know what the parameters of the negotiations, we've accepted their spending parameters. So we now know what the fence is, which was a problem with us because we were in the dark as to what their actual fence is. I think they have, with this budget, exceeded their self-imposed spending cap, but we're willing to deal with all of that. But they need to stop trying to override this veto and start negotiating. I think that's what the people want us to do. They elected a more balanced legislature, and they want us to do it. Yes.
One big piece of the General Assembly's budget was moving the DHHS headquarters to Granville County. Does your compromise proposal include that move as well?
So it's hard to know how serious that proposal is, even though it's in their budget, because we know for a fact that they are shopping the move of DHHS to various counties in order to get votes to override the veto. So to me, that shows that they're willing to make a significant change in move of state government in order just to get a vote to override this veto instead of negotiating it. Now, our proposal says we know DHHS has to move from the Dix property. In my budget, I proposed a place that the state already owns out on Blue Ridge Road. Studies have been done. Feasibility is there. We know what's going to go on there. Our proposal says we should study this and make sure that it is located in the best place. We didn't stick to my proposal. We compromised once again on that to say we would open this up to proper study. Maybe it requires a request for proposal, an RFP process, but that's something we should study. And they need to quit trying to shop things like that in order to override the veto and start negotiations in the best interest of the people. Yes.
Have you received any assurances from the Black Caucus that they'll support you on the budget?
So we've been talking with individual legislators, and I feel confident that we have the votes to sustain the veto at this time. And I think if they had votes to override the veto, that vote would have been taken. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But I think a lot of these legislators who are getting pressure from local leaders on local projects, they did fill up this budget with lots of local projects. And these legislators know that our compromise proposal contains all of those things. But let's take Cumberland, for example, where we've had a lot of local pressure. In Cumberland, all of those local projects would remain, but 9,300 more people will have health insurance in Cumberland County. There'll be 800 more jobs. They'll get $47.7 million in school construction instead of $28.8 million as in the Republican budget. Their teachers will get an 8.5% raise instead of a 3.8% raise in the Cumberland County school system. Their school personnel in Cumberland County would get a 5% raise instead of a 2% raise. The employees at Fayetteville Tech would get a 4% raise instead of a 2% raise. Employees at Fayetteville State University would get a 5% raise instead of a 1% raise. So there is significant benefit for these legislators to say, we need to talk a little bit more about what's good for Cumberland County. Those same numbers are in Robeson County with UNC Pembroke and Robeson Community College. It is significantly more for these counties and for the entire state when we do investment in education and healthcare. So I believe that these legislators, for the good of their district and the good of the state, will vote to sustain this veto to force more negotiations. This is what the people want, is real negotiations. And we're making the first step here with a real compromise proposal that comes down from my original budget and finds a place in the middle. This may not be acceptable to them. I don't anticipate it would be. This is the first counter-proposal, the first real detailed counter-proposal, because we hadn't seen a budget yet. So we hope that we can have that discussion and that we can begin the process of really trying to find a budget that I can sign and that the legislature can vote for, instead of continuing the power play and using projects and moves like DHHS to get legislators to change their vote. That's not the way that people want us to operate here. Yes, sir, in the back.
Last night, Senator Berger, in a press release, said that if lawmakers continue to support you, that all of those projects and things, they just go to a blank slate, that all the money for those things are off the board.
That's not true. I mean, we come today to say we accept all those things.
Yeah, my question is, do you think that there's room for compromise when he's saying we
Sure.
have to start from nothing?
We don't have to start from nothing. We are accepting most of their budget. I mean, we are negotiating here on raises and investments in education, Medicaid expansion, school construction versus the SCIF. These are areas where we have set out that need to be negotiated. We've already swallowed a lot that we don't particularly like because we know it will be difficult to go back to square one. So we don't want to go back to square one. And we're ready to take a lot of things we don't like in order to move the ball down the field and to get a budget. So we're ready to talk about it. Yes.
I understand that the Medicaid expansion bill that's being heard today is going to be fast-tracked onto the floor. And there's pretty high likelihood they'll also do a veto override tonight. You know, it really, you know, it could be putting the Democratic lawmakers in a hard position to say, well, yeah, we want Medicaid expansion, but we don't want this budget, you know.
Why is that a hard position? Because the budget doesn't have Medicaid expansion. So they want Medicaid expansion. If I don't know whether the bill will be amended, but if they want Medicaid expansion, some of the Democrats may not vote for this bill because of the, I think, onerous requirements in it that aren't fiscally sound, but I think it would have enough votes to pass, and that would be a good thing. But we still have another chamber to go. So I don't think Democratic legislators have any conflict or problem. I hope they will vote to sustain the veto, because just because Medicaid expansion passes the House doesn't mean we have Medicaid expansion.
You would prefer to see it embedded in the budget, not separately, so as to.
So as long as it gets passed, and I've said we could have a two-track discussion, but it has to be in the context of the budget, because we're talking about adding $4 billion a year to a $24 billion budget. So it's a fiscal issue, and it's one that needs to be talked about in the context of the budget. But we know that there are a lot of details to expansion that need to be negotiated, and that's why I proposed having a separate track, and I think that's fine. But I don't want us to be passing a budget and just having the House passing Medicaid expansion, because then you're not going to get Medicaid expansion. Yes.
I take it the speaker and the president did not accept your offer to come by this morning. Where do things stand?
You know,
Timing for you guys to actually get together.
We delivered this to them this morning. We hope they will read it, look at it, and in the next few days that we can get together. I think, as I said earlier, one of the reasons we haven't had real discussions is that they have been intent on trying to override this veto and just having a budget like they want. And I think people want us to negotiate. I think legislators see that there is a better way to do things. We're not right on everything, and we're willing to give on some issues and find common ground here. But you can't do that unless you sustain this veto. And yeah.
Have you twisted arms on Democrats?
I have talked.
Primary then? You don't-
No, I don't. That's not me. I've been up here for 3. I don't do that. I've talked to them about the importance to their district and the entire state of more health care coverage, of investment in their schools. And I think most of these legislators understand that. I know that a lot of them believe these local projects are important, and these local projects are protected in this counteroffer. But there's an opportunity to invest more, and we need to do that. Yes?
North Carolina's history is one of not having veto power up until 1996, and there's been only a very brief window of divided government in North Carolina wherein there was the veto power. Do we need to see a change in North Carolina's political culture in order for negotiations like this to be successful?
Well, I think at the end of the day, at the ballot box, people speak. And last election, they spoke. And they want more balanced government. I think they wanted their governor and legislators that were in the minority party to have a greater voice in the process. And this is what we're trying to do. And I do believe we're in times that we haven't seen before, so we're breaking new ground here. There's no question about it. But I think, you know, I don't want to question the motives of Republican leaders. I believe they think that they want a better state and they want to do it their way. But to have a true negotiation, you got to try to see both sides. And we have worked hard to see their side and have come up with a compromise this morning and are ready to continue to negotiate on all of these issues. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.